presenting about film photography, which is my hobby. And I'm just going to give you an introduction to what film photography is and also why I choose to shoot film. So, first thing, I'm going to talk a little about me. My name is Muhammad Bilal Abdurrahman. I'm 18 years old. I come from Indonesia. And I'm a film photographer. I've been shooting since 2006. I started out with digital. I got my first camera in Japan, which was a Canon digital camera. And after 2 years of shooting with it, I chose to switch to film since, I don't know, there was something attracting me to it. I'm not sure, maybe because nobody uses it. There's just a sense of, it's just unique. That's why I really wanted to shoot film first. So when I went to Vienna on my, I think, 16th birthday, my dad got me an analog camera, and since then I've been shooting film for the next 3 years, and then it just developed itself as a hobby to me. And now I have this blog called thelostInuit.com, which was a project which I started three years ago when I was in middle school, the first year of high school. There's 3 years middle school, and then it's grown to be quite popular back home in Indonesia. And I wouldn't say that I'm an expert or a professional, but I'd say that I'm quite experienced. And these days I shoot both analog and digital, and you can see my work in thelostInuit.com. And I've been featured in some exhibitions, some photography exhibitions back home. Most recently being Tiga which means 36, which symbolizes the 36 frames in a 35mm film, which I'll explain later. And yeah, that's a little about that's a bit about me. So what is film photography? Film photography is photography through the medium of film. So using film strips rather than using the digital cameras. So you have to use analog cameras. So here's a little about cameras and films. Usually, people who shoot film use old cameras. It's not a lot of companies produce film cameras anymore. For example, I know that Leica, the German company, produces film cameras, and I know that Hasselblad also still produces film cameras, but it only caters to a niche market since they're very expensive. So generally, most people just use vintage, old, antique analog cameras. For example, I have a picture of a few of my favorite cameras here. I also collect these cameras. I have about 30 at home, but my favorite is the Minolta X700, which is a 35mm camera, which I brought to Sydney. Mamiya RB67, which shoots medium format. Compact camera from Russia, the Lomo. And also I shoot Polaroid sometimes with the Polaroid land camera. So the first thing you have to know about a film camera is that there are two types of films. And those are the 35mm ones and the 120mm films. The 120s look like this. They're a bit bigger. And 35mm look like this. This one can shoot up from 12 to 16 frames, depending on the size of the pictures. The dimensions are usually 6x6, or I think you can also shoot 6x4s, but it also depends on the camera. And this is the 35mm strips, and usually you can shoot up to 36 exposures on it. And what really attracts me to film photography is that each film has its own characteristics. For example, you can get black and white film, you can get I can't really explain it, but for example, if you shoot a Kodak film and then you shoot a Fuji film, the product is definitely going to be, the finished product is definitely going to be different, because it depends on how you develop the film and how you shoot it. And each film has its own characteristics, so I think that every photo is unique, and it really gives me a lot of control and a lot of freedom though it also gives me like some constraints since you can't change the film on many of the cameras midway. So that really challenges me to become more creative. So next. So if you're wondering who still uses film, a lot of professional photographers still use film these days, or at least they still use the analog cameras, but they changed the film part of it. The back of the camera, for example, I know like they use the digital back to transfer the photos that you get from the actual old camera and then straight to a computer. And some fashion photographers still use it, and some black and white photographers still use it. These days, I think there's a recent boom on film photography because many of the young people are using film these days since it's considered a bit hip and youthful. Since some of the colors that you can get from these cameras and films are quite vibrant, and they're usually high contrast, especially if you use a technique called cross-developing. There's negative film and positive film. If you cross-develop, that means that you develop negative film and positive liquid. So it turns out, the colors turn out a bit funky, like this. So I think that's also because of the recent boom of the website of lomography.com. They sell old cameras and they sell also new cameras. Like, they actually look like toy cameras, but some of them are quite expensive. They can get up to $800. And yeah, so now they're like the major stockists for film and film cameras, and they also produce their own films. And I think it's gotten pretty big around the world. So these are just some examples of the photos you might know. These are the Andy Warhol Polaroids, which are quite famous now. Next. So why do I choose to shoot film? There's many reasons why I choose to shoot film, but one of the main reasons is because I really enjoy the feeling of success when I get rolled back from the lab. Since if you process it in a lab, in every lab it's going to be different. The outcome is going to be very different since it depends on the engineers and who handles the film and what type of film. But every time there's a really nice photo, I just feel like, it's like Christmas. You just get you get just a big surprise, and especially if the photo is good, and then you get a lot of feedback from it. It's awesome. And I really enjoy colors and what you can do with colors, especially with photography, since I'm not really good at using the computer to edit my photos, but recently I've learned how to. But yeah, I've grown used to using film. So I try to experiment with analog cameras and film cameras, and you can get some really funky colors, for example, in this picture. And this is all natural. This is all from my photography, and none of these are edited at all. So these are natural. And for example, this picture, it has that purplish tone which you can get if you use like Adobe Photoshop, but I did it without Adobe Photoshop. That's because I cross-processed the film. And also you can get like a dreamy feel to the photos depending on the cameras that you use, so it gives me a lot of flexibility and freedom. And there's like natural vignetting, and like in this photo and that photo. And I also enjoy shooting black and white since I aspire to become like a professional photographer. And I usually do street photography, which means like photography where you just shoot people and you shoot by reflex. So it's to capture those little moments where you don't really see them a lot. For example, it's just everyday life, but you're trying to capture the things that you don't normally see. That's like street photography. So that's why I try to shoot black and white, since I think it's a bigger challenge, since you really have to get the right subject, since you can't really depend on the colors and you can't really depend on the vibrance and tone of the setting. You just have to depend on the subject. So I think that's a bit of a challenge. And another reason why I chose to shoot film is because it's highly experimental. For example, this photo, because I use analog cameras, sometimes you can do multiple exposures, which means that you shoot twice on the same frame. That's why these two pictures overlap there. That's why it looks a bit funky. And also you can like use analog cameras, it's also very cheap, so I can buy really good lenses at a pretty cheap price, so you can get like awesome blur effects such as this picture. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching, and visit my blog. Any questions?
So, who's the young lady there?
It's me. That's not a
Is
lady.
that you?
That's a hat.
It looks like you have beautiful eyes, Bill. Look like ladies' eyes.
Anybody want to ask?
That's
any
really
questions?
you, not your sister?
No, it's me. My sister is a bit chunkier.
Okay. Well, lovely, actually. Yes, I would like to know, is it difficult to find